About 3,000 of you subscribe, but only about 200 are getting notifications, so click the bell and click all. Hello lovelies, I'm gonna be your teacher today, and my aim is to equip you with the ability, at least to some degree, to decode and understand the messages that are being flung around protest, amongst all the unrest that's going on. Way back in the mists of time when dinosaurs ruled the earth, I did communication studies as an A-level, something that it has broadly been decided to be a bullshit subject, but of everything I ever learned at school or beyond, I think communication studies has actually been the most useful thing that I ever studied, because it gave me a certain immunity to advertising, a way of understanding the messaging and so on that has been directed towards me. So I hope to impart a little bit of that to you, to encourage you to analyse the media that you consume. There's a few internet truisms. Rule 34, for example. There's porn of it, no exceptions. One of the more recent versions, one of the more recent ideas to join the pantheon of Rule 34 or Godwin's Law or Poe's Law is this meme in and of itself that the left can't meme. This didn't used to be the case if you go back in time during the world wars and everything else, but the left, or ostensibly left states like the USSR, were very good at memeing. Their propaganda was on point, it was extremely stylistic, it had artistic worth, and their messages were very simple and punchy. But these days, if you look at the memes and the messages coming out of what is supposedly the left, though ideologically I think they've drifted a great deal, it's mostly terrible. There's a few exceptions, there's a few good ones here and there, but the stereotype of the leftist meme now is a wall of text, which kind of defeats the point and the object of being a meme. A meme is something simple that combines text and image in a sort of mutually reinforcing sort of punch to get across a really powerful message. And this kind of wall of text and the kind of jargon that leftist memes tend to use kind of defeats the object, defeats the point. There's a lot of decoding and understanding and preloading with the meaning of all that jargon that has to take place for that meme to land, and that is, I think, why the left can't meme. In comparison, the right sticks to punchier, more simplistic messages, and it's very successful. And also you have various online troll groups and so on who are also very successful in creating memes and getting the left to jump according to their tune. Ideas such as the OK symbol suddenly meaning white power doesn't originate from the far right, it originates from 4chan, but people gullibly went along with it. Or the drinking of milk. There's innumerable examples of things like this, and every single time the left falls back and accepts the troll and the right-wing redefinition of terms and language and so on, and cedes them ground. So it doesn't have to be the case that the left can't meme. But in this current context, and with what the left has become, it has become very difficult for them to effectively meme, to accomplish anything in the online sphere, and that is now the public square. And that's where they fail, unfortunately. Now, the situation being what it is, I need to front load everything with my positions. I am extremely left-wing. I am a left anarchist. I believe in whatever gets the greatest freedom for the greatest number of people, and so pragmatically that leads me to socialism. I understand and accept the violence that's occurring. I understand the rage. I understand the sense of injustice. But simultaneously, I can understand the point of view that just sees violence and destruction and wants to condemn that as well. For me, it's more of a pragmatic thing. Non-violent revolts and revolutions and protests tend to accomplish more than violent ones. I also don't see this in a racial context. For me, and this may just be my left-wing bias coming in, my old-school left-wing bias coming in, but for me, I see this as a class and wealth conflict and problem. And I believe that fixating upon race just about guarantees that the issue is not going to get fixed. And it's going to drive more of a racial wedge between people and set them at each other. So I am immensely frustrated by the whole thing. I don't think people are addressing the real problem. That might be my blinkers, but the statistics seem to bear me out here. So that's where I'm at. I'm not altogether on anybody's side because nobody is altogether on my side, but if I'm on a side, it's with the protesters pushing for change. I just wish there was more focus and that they were going about it in a more effective way. It just seems in this that everybody involved is guaranteed to do the wrong thing. Another big part of the problem that we're having at the moment, and I think something that gives me a rarer perspective, is that the pseudo-left and the pseudo-right, whatever you want to call these two camps, society around the world, at least the Western world, the UK and the US certainly, is very divided. Nobody seems to exist in the same world. There's a few of us who aren't necessarily in the middle, but we're in the middle of these two camps, who see information from both sides, who see interpretations from both sides, and there's not that many of us. We're quite rare, the people who can have perception of what's going on in both camps. But it's certainly, for me and some friends and co-workers I have who are further to the right than me, more centrist or more conservative, more traditionally conservative really, they get to see both sides, I get to see both sides, and it's distressingly obvious that neither side exists in the same world. They don't see the same things, they don't receive the same communications, they don't receive any sort of unbiased view of the news. They each have their own version of a news instead, and these viewpoints could not be further apart. Their experience of the world could not be further apart. So there is no way for any kind of common ground to exist at the moment. And if you do try to pierce either bubble with a bit of information from the other side, or just an observation of the news rather than a news, you're likely to be turned on by either side. Though the left tends to do that more. If you don't fall 100% in line with their position and their interpretation, you get lumped in with the opposite side, the far right, the Nazis, many of whom aren't anything like that. The right doesn't tend to do that as much, and I think that's a big part of what is making the right so successful in recent years. It's all preamble. English is one of the most expressive languages in the world. According to some reckonings, it has more descriptive adjectives than just about any other language in the world. This is probably why, along with other historical reasons, English is such a predominant language when it comes to entertainment and writing, poetry, song, all of these things. English is therefore capable of a great deal of nuance. Picking one word over another carries different implications and so on. In some ways this is great because it's really, really, really expressive, and in other ways it's bad because not everyone detects every single piece of nuance in every single different selection of words. Communication can largely be broken down into semantics, the meaning of terms, semiotics, the meaning of symbols, and context, which it's anything surrounding the message that you're trying to convey. It can be tone, it can be events, it can be the preceding and succeeding passages of text. Semantics is really important, despite the fact that so many people say, oh, that's just a semantic argument. Because if you don't speak the same language, if you don't take the same meaning from words, you cannot meaningfully communicate. And this is a big problem with the use of jargon and the way in which language has separated, mostly in the kind of left pseudo-academic sphere, but also others. So a word that can or a phrase that can have a perfectly innocuous meaning to most people can really trigger people on one political extreme or the other, and make them turn viciously on people who might be sympathetic with a more measured and tolerant approach. So you got semantics, the actual meaning of words, semiotics, symbolism. Yeah, a word can simultaneously have a semantic meaning and a semiotic meaning, and then you got context, like I say, which can be tone or anything else. So if I say, wow, that's really good, to someone after they present me something they've created, that can have one meaning. If I go, wow, that's really good, that will have a different meaning, because the way in which it's expressed. I'm clumsily trying to describe this, but I think most people understand this, even if they don't understand the jargon. Another really important aspect is that there's the message you mean to convey to someone, which can then be altered by the medium through which it is transmitted, and then can be altered again by the way in which the person who receives the message decodes and understands it. For example, one of the reasons I started my YouTube channel was because communicating in text, I was constantly being misunderstood, and this despite being, not to toot my own horn, but something of an expert in the field through practice, if nothing else. But when you can convey a message in text, you necessarily lose a lot of surrounding information that helps people interpret what you're saying. So you don't get the body language, you don't get the tone. A lot is missing when we talk in text. This used to lead lots of people to blame emails for people being pushed apart, and not understanding each other and getting into conflicts and trolling and flame wars and so on. The fact that it was in text and a lot of the surrounding sort of meaning and context and tone and so on was stripped away from text used to be blamed quite a lot for people not understanding each other and getting into conflicts. Social media has exacerbated that to an extent, because social media is immediate. You're immediately reacting, you're not putting much thought, it's not very long form. In the case of Twitter and so on, it's contracting what you can say, how much you can say, so there isn't as much room for nuance or explanation. So that makes the problem even worse in some ways. What's a good example of this? Well, I'll get into those a bit later, but we'll take the OK symbol that we've already discussed. Right? What does it mean? It means OK. It's a symbol, right? But it conveys the meaning of OK. Everything's OK. That's great, or that's choice, or whatever else the case might be. It carries multiple meanings. But on top of all that, thanks to a 4chan trolling operation, according to some people, mostly people on the left now, it means white power. I don't think it does. It has a long established tradition of meaning other things. There's the circle game as well, which gets caught up in all of this. But if you innocently make the OK symbol to mean OK, it gets conveyed and contextualized on social media or whatever else, which you have no real control over, and it can be received as you supporting white power, which is not what you're attempting to convey at all. So all of these things are really important. The semantics, the meaning, semiotics, the symbolism, context, which can alter, shift, and change the meaning of semantics or semiotics. There's the message that you're trying to convey. There's the medium that it translates through, which can alter the message. And then there's the perception of the receiver. this is all jargon, which I'm saying is a bad thing, but it's important to understand all of these aspects. Where this really comes into play, I think, is in this idea of dog whistles, where you can say something that seems to have an innocent meaning, but others will take what you're saying and assume that it means something else, that it's coded language, that to someone else it will convey meaning that's different to the commonly understood meaning. So the OK symbol, again, to you it could just mean okay, but other people are going to take it as some kind of special meaning or flag to the alt-right, the far right, to say I'm on your side. Spies used to use this coded language, nonsense phrasing that would go over the radio to the resistance movement in France with the goose is flying high this year, which seems like an innocuous phrase, but if you decode it through a code book, in this case it could mean dynamite the railways or whatever else. Dog whistles are particularly insidious because lots of people assume dog whistles when none are intended and end up condemning and damning people and alienating them for something they never did in the first place. This is a kind of recurring theme here. There have been some really big failures in communication, in activism, in recent years, well, somewhat recent years. I think the granddaddy of them all, the biggest communications failure that we've experienced in sort of recent activist history, is probably Occupy Wall Street. Now, when Occupy started, it was an incredibly broad base of support. You had left-wing people, you had libertarian people, you had anarcho-capitalists and anarcho-syndicalists, you had ordinary people who were just incredibly fucked off at the whole state of affairs that we were living with. That, particularly in the US, plutocracy had captured government, that money in politics was corrupting everything. That is a simple message that a very broad base of people can get behind. And so long as that was the message, get money out of politics, end corruption, the protests were effective. Now, where it started to go wrong is where a whole lot of other people tried to hitch their additional messages and ideas on. They tried to make it about socialism, for example. I can sympathise with that, I can empathise with that. I think it's the most pragmatic solution to a lot of the problems that the US in particular is facing, and we need to shore it up here in the UK. But a lot of people were not on board with that for one reason or another, not understanding what socialism was, or perfectly understanding what the people arguing for socialism meant, which wasn't socialism either. But I'm getting off track. One thing after another was piled on. Some rather extremist feminist ideas, some rather extremist black nationalist ideas, things that violated people's sense of ethics and honour and honesty and so on. And so bit by bit, by taking on all of these other things, Occupy lost one group, then another group, then another bit of support and another bit of support, until all that was left was a bunch of ideological extremists policing each other for purity. And so it faltered and it went absolutely wrong and was no longer any good for anything. This pattern has been repeated. Take Black Lives Matter. Now, as a message goes, it's quite simple, it's quite effective in that one narrow way, but it's not just a message, it's an organisation. And that organisation has a whole lot of ideological trappings and baggage that a lot of people can't go along with. There's a fairly radical feminist hook into that. There's quite a lot of black nationalism and, well, frankly, racism associated with the movement. It's just it's anti-white racism, so a lot of people find that acceptable. Yeah, it's not just saying Black Lives Matter. There's all this other stuff along with it. Plus they now have a reputation for things like disrupting Bernie Sanders events and so on. So while you can agree with the message, there's all this baggage with it that stops people going along with it. One particularly egregious problem here is all lives matter. All lives matter is actually the better message. It's saying that, everybody's life matters, and if your life is being considered less, that's a problem. It's a much broader, more appealing message, whatever its origin. And a lot of people who aren't steeped in internet culture and don't follow this stuff very closely, often quite innocently and even supportively say, all lives matter. Because if you're uninitiated, that is the better message. That's egalitarian, that's broad-based. It's saying, if you're being treated differently, that's wrong. You should be treated the same as everyone else. But the reaction, even to innocent people who say all lives matter, is virulent, hostile. The immediate assumption is that they're somewhere to the right of Heinrich Himmler. And so a lot of centrist, for want of a better word, or fluffy liberal types are being turned off to what's going on and what's being said, or being cut off from access to the messaging around these things, because it's immediately assumed that if they care about everybody, that means they somehow don't care about black people. It's terrible messaging, it's terrible tactics, it's all but guaranteed to end up shooting the Black Lives Matter movement in the foot, because you need to bring everybody with you. And when you're that hostile to people who are saying, well, yeah, of course, everyone matters, we need to make a change so that everybody is treated the same. When you alienate those people, you're undermining your own movement. The counter memes aren't particularly effective either, because I don't think they understand where people are coming from when they say all lives matter. A common example of a counter meme is to say, well, that's like saying all houses matter. When they're on fire, we want the fire department to put out the houses that are on fire. Not the ones that aren't. Where's the sense in spraying down all the houses with water if only one is on fire? Well, that's misunderstanding, I think, where people who say all lives matter sincerely are coming from. They're saying, yeah, the house that's on fire should be put out no matter what colour its door is. That's where they're coming from. Antifa is another recent example. So a lot of people are quite simplistically saying that Antifa just means anti-fascist. There's baggage. Antifa is, however loosely organised, and it's associated with hostile and violent censorship of milquetoast conservatives and even dissenting left-wing people. They've shut down talks, they've smashed up universities, they've started shit. So conflating Antifa with anti-fascist isn't correct. And it's incredible. Simplistic is generally good when it comes to memes, but if your simplistic understanding is that if someone is against Antifa, they must be pro-fascist, same problem as with all lives and black lives. Right? I'm anti-fascist, I would say more anti-authoritarian, anti-totalitarian, and that's the very reason that I don't have much truck with Antifa as an organisation, because their actions have been authoritarian, censorious. Right? It's the same as I can say I'm an egalitarian, but I'm not a feminist, because there's baggage with feminism, and a lot of people are in a similar position. So if you equate not being on board with the worst excesses of Antifa's tactics as an organisation, however loose, with being pro-fascist, you're missing the point and you're alienating people again. We can also see some of this signalling in the language that news organisations and so on use, whether they say looting or stealing or riot or unrest, whatever else. And then there's all the corporate virtue signalling thing. Like, we support X. They don't actually do anything to support X or Y or Z. It's like Pride Month. Rainbow cups don't make any difference. Saying that we support black people doesn't actually make any difference unless you follow it up with action. And most people can see through that, and that creates an even more hostile and suspicious atmosphere for real activism. It doesn't help. It undermines the message because it's just exploitation. I don't really see a way out of this so long as these two camps don't interact or talk with each other, and so as long as it's impossible to bring things up in either group that don't go along with what they already think. This is particularly a problem on the left. If you even slightly disagree or you have a different emphasis, you will instantly be demonized. It's less of a problem on the right. They're much more willing to communicate and to explain, and even if their ideas are obnoxious, the mere fact that they're willing to discuss and debate and talk gives them an advantage. The left, I refuse to consider them genuinely left-wing because they're so hierarchical and authoritarian, but so long as the left refuses to do that, fails to do that, they're going to continue to lose ground. And things like this don't help. Things like the current events do not help. Within your bubble, you see an obvious case of police racism and a meaningful and understandable backlash against that, leading to unrest and rebellion and people grabbing what they can because they've been denied so much for so long. People on the other side, for all they might agree that this is police brutality and so on, may not necessarily see it in terms of race, and they see the backlash as massively disproportionate and justifying the kind of violence that police engage in. Plus they're on teams now, everyone's on a team, and if the kinds of people that have been calling you horrible names and blaming everything on you for the past few years are on one side, you're damn well going to be on the other. And then we've got agitators, and I'm fairly certain from everything I've seen that there are both far right and far left agitators involved here. There's police agitation. It's just a colossal mess, and nobody stands a chance of getting any sort of nuanced or accurate picture of that because they don't exist in the same world. And I worry because what passes for the left has become so horrendous, become so ineffective at messaging, demonize so many people, drive so many people away and into the arms of the right. I worry about the right gaining ascendant power, ascendant, unassailable power. Effective memes and messages have broad appeal. They're simple, they're unambiguous. They get distorted as little as possible by the context or the symbolism around them. It's a hard thing to do, and this is a stupidly long video with me using a lot of jargon which is going against just about everything that I've been saying, right? Sometimes it's necessary. But if you really want to create a broad-based movement and bring people along with you, you have to keep it broad, you have to keep it simple, you have to keep it unambiguous. And that's a challenge, because even a simple positive phrase like diversity is our strength, which is true on the face of it, can end up twisted if it's recontextualized. The right loves to use that phrase when they talk about struggle cuddle gangs in the north of England, for example. So that even something as simple as that can be turned around. And even something as broad, holistic, fluffy, nice, and on-side as all lives matter can end up being interpreted as I'm Hitler. All you can do is try. I actually want to see positive change. I want to see the actual problems that lie beneath all of this reaction and chaos addressed. I just don't see it happening without intelligent people looking at the genuine cause and effect, and without effective messaging. But what do I know? I'm not a genius. This is just my perspective. And I hope you find something useful in it. Zang.
Aren't you a little tired of so-called horror media about shiny, sparkly, angsty, whiny monsters? I know I am, and that's why I created Actual Fucking Monsters, where you will play an actual fucking monster doing horrible and monstrous things and being tracked down and killed for it. Buy now at DriveThruRPG, post-mort.com or lulu.com.